In this episode, we sit down with Father Josiah Trenham, a priest with over 27 years of wisdom, to explore important issues facing Gen Z, from the clash between modernism and traditionalism to the shaming of purity in today's culture. Father Josiah shares insight on the timeless roles of men and women, and how embracing these God-given roles can lead to true fulfillment. Join me as we dive into how Orthodox faith stands firm amidst a rapidly changing world.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us once again. And I just wanted to say thank you so much, Father Josiah, for being willing to join us and to do an interview. So I'm really excited for this. Now, for people who may not know you, why don't you just introduce yourself and maybe do a quick rundown of how you came to faith.
My name is Father Josiah Trenham, and I am the pastor of St. Andrew Orthodox Church in Riverside, California. I've been the pastor here for 26 years. I'm a Southern Californian, born and raised here, raised by Christian parents. I have been serving God since I was in my early 20s. I wanted to become a pastor, and I hope I can do it into my last breath, especially working with the people of God and seeking the kingdom of heaven, which is the purpose of my life.
Now, when I look at my current generation right now, Gen Z, many of them, if you look at all the whole statistics, we're looking at a majority of people who do not have faith or claim to have a particular one, sort of floating everywhere they want to. Um, and I think that's mainly probably because many of their parents did not raise them with the faith. Why do you think that has had such an impact on my generation?
Before I tell you the cause and in my judgment of this great collapse of the practice of faith, we should stop for a minute and look at it, because this is unheard of in American history, absolutely unheard of. And it also is very much contra global trends. So in our country, to see a generation that doesn't explicitly affirm faith in God, the vast majority, but is confessing that on the subject, the most important subjects in the world, does God exist? What is the purpose of my life? Is there life after death? To confess agnosticism on those most fundamental questions, this is catastrophic. This is a massive thing. This is not just, are people driving at an older age, right? Or are they having a difficulty buying houses? Those sociological studies are interesting, but that's not what this is about. This is fundamental human realities that determine everything. So this is a unique time. Pinpointing the cause of it on our local scene here in the West, in the collapsing secular West, is a very important thing to do. But before I suggest what the cause is, let me also point out that worldwide, faith and religion is exploding. There are no places on the globe that are contemplating and enthused by unbelief, except in the collapsing secular West. So the globalization project, which has been going on, led by very secular forces from the West, is running into tremendous problems all over the world, because at the heart of kind of the Great Reset globalization process is this complete rejection of faith as any sort of normative guide for life. And that's just not where the world is. It just so happens that here in the West, we are, shall we say, particularly your generation, Generation Z, is inheriting the mess of their parents, who have given themselves to the secular project with abandon. I could suggest that it really started with the sexual revolution in the 1960s, and that has progressed by an undoing of basic kind of moral and religious norms in our society. So in my lifetime, being born in Southern California, I'm in Los Angeles and Angelino, I witnessed the overthrow of marriage. So the passage of divorce law, what's called no-fault divorce, happened when I was a young man. Then that was followed very quickly by the legalization of abortion in 1973. That was followed by the promotion of the decriminalization of sodomy and all sorts of sexual perversion. That climaxed in 2003 with the Lawrence versus Texas decision, which the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia said was the death of all morals legislation in America.
Right. Yeah.
And so we've seen this progressive movement. Then we in the Obergefell decision in 2016, which decimated a definition of marriage in order to accommodate a small kind of movement of the LGBT movement who weren't interested in marriage since they got the permission to marry. Only a tiny percentage of that group have actually accessed marriage. That movement has never been interested in marriage. What they were interested in was ending marriage as a normative social reality. And they have succeeded in doing that. When I was born in Los Angeles in 1967, 75% of all the households in California had a mother, a father, and children in it. It was just vastly normative. Today, that number is something like 41%, which means the majority of all homes don't even have a normal family, what all normal societies would consider essential to the propagation of their society. A husband, a wife, and children. That's no longer normative. So your generation has been raised by a significant contingent of people who have thrown off traditional religious and moral norms, and you have been, what shall I say, eating the gravel of that social experiment, which has never been done before in the history of the world. There is no precedent for this total rebellion against moral norms in any place. And yet it's being promoted like it's so obvious, I remember as a marker in my own life when President Obama was running for office. President Obama, I knew by reading his voting record, I knew that he was not in any way a traditional religious person or a traditional American with regards to morality. But he had to publicly defend those positions, including traditional marriage. He had to publicly defend those positions on both of his campaigns for his first election to president and his second term as well. In fact, he even met at large churches, catering, accommodating the Christian population, and said in those to those audience that he absolutely was a defender of traditional marriage until he won his second election. Within 1 month of being elected and never, of course, being able to be elected again, and therefore not needing to lie anymore, he had a revelation that marriage didn't need to be between a man and a woman, which is basically saying the traditional family is not important. And he had a revelation, and he didn't just have a revelation. Evidently, at the same time that he had this moral development in his life, his Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, also came to some sort of revelation that homosexuality was now perfectly normative and having traditional marriage was worthless. But they also decided that not only have they personally changed, but they decided that everybody else in the entire country had to change. And so they said, both of them, both President Obama and his Secretary of State Clinton, said publicly that any religion that defined marriage as a man and a woman were prejudiced and, quote, needed to change their doctrine, unquote. Can you imagine? These are politicians who had a moral change. First of all, when you run for office and you pledge something, you're not allowed to morally change because you promised to defend a certain morality. You're not free to just tell the people who voted for you the next day, I'm sorry, I don't believe any of that anymore, okay? That's deceit. But not only did they say, did they have a change, but they said we all needed to change. These politicians became theologians. Nobody knew that Hillary Clinton was a theologian. Nobody knew that Barack Obama was a theologian. Now they actually know the morality, the ethics, and that people, religious groups, the Orthodox Church, the Catholic Church, the evangelical churches, we need to change our morality. And they didn't stop there. They created an ambassadorship. To be an ambassador of the United States is a very great honor. It's a very serious position where you represent the president of our country in diplomatic relations with other countries. They invented an ideological ambassadorship for the promotion of the LGBT agenda and sent that person which continues, by the way. President Trump did not negate it. President Trump, forgive me, is terrible on this issue of marriage and human sexuality. He allowed the ideological LGBT ambassador to remain, and that ambassador goes around the world telling countries that they cannot be defended by us, their poor cannot be supported by us, unless they join this secular rush to the overthrow of traditional religious norms and this attack on Jesus and the Christian faith. And this is where we are today. Can you do that? Can you overturn the wisdom of the ages and not have terrible consequences, not kill hope, not hurt the formation of marriages? Can you have a revolution in which moral norms are abandoned and think people are going to be prospering and healthy? I don't think so. I think that this is the source of a lot of confusion, and we're paying a terrible price. It sounds pretty depressing, but I'll tell you, as a pastor, I've never seen the level of reconsideration amongst young people as I have today. So, a number of young people who are questioning the state of the world as they inherited it from their parents, questioning the fundamental commitments of those who have created a world in which they are less well off, and I don't just mean financially, I mean in every way, mental health, relationships-wise, than their parents. This is the first time that's ever happened in American history. And the young people are saying, hey, what did you do? What did you do? And they're reconsidering. I've always, as a priest, I've always had a large number of people that I prepare for baptism and that I baptize and help become Christians. That's what priests do. But that number since COVID has quadrupled.
Wow.
Yeah, quadrupled. This last Easter, I had 110 catechumens asking for baptism. This is a parish of about 1,000 people. That's a significant percentage of these are new people who have never practiced the Christian faith, and they're wanting faith. They want to know God. They want time-tested life. And it's not just here, it's happening all over Western Europe. I was recently just in the country of Romania. While I was there, I received statistics from baptisms in different European countries. 12,000 people were baptized on the day before Easter into the Catholic Church in France. And the Catholic Church in France has been shrinking for decades. And now what do you see? Almost all of those 12,000 people are young. So there is a serious reconsideration going on. How big it will be, I don't know.
Right.
But I certainly hope it will be massive.
Right.
Absolutely massive.
Good. Now, you know what? I have heard from even my own friends. I've heard the argument that Christianity or just religion in general, or fairy tales told to people back in the days to help them go through life, right? So I just want to hear your argument for these people, all of my friends, right, who are saying that. I want to hear your argument for faith and why they should be pursuing Christianity.
Well, that's quite the affirmation that Jesus is a fairy tale. We should ask them, those who are suggesting this, to define what fairy tales are. We have the genre of fairy tales in our literature. This has been the case for centuries and centuries, and we know who wrote these fairy tales. We know where they have come from, and fairy tales are not presented as historically accurate. Nobody reads fairy tales thinking that this is true history. The Christian faith has never been, in 2,000 years, presented as a fairy tale. Jesus is the most documented human person in the history of the human race. No one has been written about, preached about, studied more than Jesus. And the documents associated with his life are the most abundant of any ancient figure whatsoever. If you asked your friends who are thinking this way, if they think Alexander the Great is a fairy tale, what would they say? If you asked that if George Washington, the first president of our country, was a fairy tale, would they say, yes, he's a fairy tale? Both of those, Alexander the Great and George Washington, the amount of historical documentation about them is paltry compared to what we have about Jesus. We have documents not just from Jesus' closest friends, the apostles, right? The apostle Peter, apostle Paul, who saw him on the road to Damascus, the apostles. We have documentation about Jesus from his enemies. We have documentation from people who were observers, like the Jewish historian Tacitus and Josephus. I mean, these documents show a very full description of Jesus' life. This is hardly a fairy tale. I would just say that anyone who is hiding behind that idea isn't very serious. That's not a very serious. So become serious. Life is serious. Your friends' lives are serious. To suggest that Jesus and his teachings didn't really happen, who's going to say that? That's very thin. That's very thin thinking.
Yeah. Uh, I'm sort of switching over to a different topic. I know I've been noticing with Gen Z, there's almost a lack of dating. I think
Yeah.
it's been a little weird. But then I've also been noticing a lot of my friends get married younger ages now. So it's been a very weird, like, sort of
Interesting.
scene right now. But currently, Gen Z is in the age where they're able to get married. Many of them are dating or trying to. But I want to know if you're comfortable sharing your own personal life and how picking a spouse who is equally yoked as you will influence your own faith.
That's a wonderful subject. The question of relationships for human beings, there's no more important question. If you have an appreciation of what a human being is not just an animal. Human beings are mysterious creatures of God. We have souls, we have minds, we have consciences, and we have bodies. In the scriptural record, the last aspect of God's creation, the final capstone of what he created, was the human being. First, he brought the world into existence over the course of 6 days, the account says in the opening chapters of Genesis. God created because he is himself uncreated. This is the first great bifurcation or difference in the world, is that difference between God, who was not made by anyone. He is self-existence. That's what God means, to be self-existent. He has the power of existence himself. And he brought the world as an expression of his love into being. And then he fashioned everything in the world and made the human being last. And it was only in making the human being that he used the words, he went from calling everything good that he had made on the first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day. After he saw what he meant, he said, this is good. When he made the human being, he said, this is very good. And then he made a distinction amongst the human being between the female and the male. These are the three great fundamental bifurcations of the opening chapters of the Bible. God and everything else, God in creation, and then within creation, everything that's existed and God's image, because that's what the human being is. Nothing else is his image except the human being. That's how special humans are. And then within the human reality, male and female. So for us, for people for whom the scriptural record is extremely important, to be a human being is a very, very special thing. We're not just animals driven by chemicals. Within the relationship between man and woman, God also fashioned something from the beginning, which means that it has foundational, basic relevance to our life. And that something is marriage. He fashioned Eve from Adam's own body, which is very special. God put Adam into like a deep anesthesia, a deep sleep, and then he took a rib out of Adam's side and he fashioned Eve such that when she was done, he could honestly say that they were one flesh. He fashioned Eve also from his rib, and the church fathers say that that's very important to note. He didn't grab Adam's big toe and fashion the woman. That would have been a very bad precedent. Some men foolishly act that way, as though women somehow should be manhandled or should be stepped upon. No. The fathers say he fashioned the woman from the rib because the rib is on the side of man, and the woman is meant to be his companion. They're meant to have a journey together, and the rib is the guardian of the heart. And that's the function of the woman in the man's life. She's the one, the man is the head of the family, but the woman is the heart of the family. She helps the man to live his best motives, his best intention. She can help love be supreme. Men are protectors, men are providers, men are guardians, but they get civilized by their women. Their mothers, their wives, their daughters help them to become the human beings that God is calling us to be. And all of that is reflected here. So just to ask this question, the reason I'm saying these larger theological issues, realities, is because when you're thinking about relationships, this isn't just something that we should start thinking about because we've turned 14 or 15. We have now chemicals that are going through our body. We've gone through puberty, and all of a sudden, girls have gone from having cooties to being of great interest to young men, right? That maturation and that change of reality should be examined thoughtfully by young adults. They should say, okay, why? Why is it that I'm like this? Why am I so interested in a member of the opposite sex? Why do I have a great desire to be attractive and desired by someone? Well, the answer to that is because it is huge. It goes back literally to the creation of the world. It's at the very heart of the human experience, is that the formation of relationships is something that God's deeply invested in. If you read the scriptures from Genesis through Revelation, you see that God, in his providence, brings couples together. I'll give you an example. The great father of our faith, Abraham, the patriarch. This is 2,000 years before Jesus. God called Abraham to become his. And Abraham, he called him out of a pagan land, Ur of the Chaldeans. And he said, you need to be my son. And through you, I'll bless all the nations of the earth. And Abraham became God's. Abraham had a son named Isaac. And God's promises were going to pass from Abraham through his son Isaac and down to us in the time of Christ. And Abraham didn't know where he could find a good wife for his son Isaac. So he prayed and he asked his servant, who's left nameless in the scripture. This is in the 24th chapter of Genesis, the first book of Moses called Genesis. And the servant of Abraham was commissioned by the patriarch to go find a believing wife. Abraham didn't want his son to marry one of the pagan women who worshiped idols. Idols don't save. Only relationship to the true God saves. And so he sent this man to go to Abraham's relatives in a distant place and to find a suitable wife. And that man prayed. He fell on his face and he said, Lord, please, God of my master Abraham, please help me find a suitable wife for my Lord Isaac. Let the woman who meets me at the well, who says to me, he made a very specific prayer, who says to me, let me bring you water and let me water your camels. Let that be the one that you've chosen for my master's son, Isaac. So he went to the place where Abraham had told him to go. He came to the well. And what do you know? A young woman named Rebecca comes to the well and she says to him exactly what he prayed about. Let me water your camels and bring you some water too. And he fell on his face and he said, I praise you, Lord, for bringing this woman. This must be the woman that you've chosen. And sure enough, he met the family. They end up having this incredibly famous love, Isaac and Rebecca. But it shows you how invested God is. If we bring God into our desire by prayer, like Abraham's servant did, God will arrange the marriage that's important because it is that important. Yeah. So when people are thinking about joining themselves, the first thing they should do is step back and ask themselves, do I appreciate how significant this is? We shouldn't just act on our enzymes, on our chemicals. Just because we have a great desire to be with a man or a woman doesn't mean that we should act on that just immediately based on attraction. A lot of people are doing that. They're dealing with sexual attraction and the pleasure associating with it as though it's an independent thing. and not an incredibly powerful force for good or evil. But it is. Sexual attraction can destroy your life. Just ask anyone who's gotten pregnant outside of wedlock and have been tempted to and gave into the temptation for an abortion. So many women are bearing the scars of being in a circumstance that overwhelmed them because they responded to the arousal of sexual attraction before they had thought through about how powerful this is. And there are many other sorrows associated with acting too quickly. We should step back, appreciate it, recognize that God put this to drive us towards one another so that we stay together and we can form a family. Marriage is God's miraculous creation. It's not a human creation. This is why it's so ridiculous for politicians to mess with it. It's not a political creation. Marriage is pre-political. Marriage is something that is as old as the human race that God made. States are way down the river in historical creation. So the idea that a state can mess with the definition of something that pre-existed it is backwards. It's backwards. Marriage is God's divinely created reality to join a bunch of things that are super powerful together. To join sexual desire to love to commitment, right? It's possible to have sexual desire without love, but the Lord says, no, it should be joined to love. And it's also possible to have love without commitment. Marriage is a certain type of sexual attraction, desire, love, and commitment. And then to connect that commitment to the formation of a family, to the conception of children, to the raising of children, those 7 things are all powerful forces, and they're all united and regulated and inspired by marriage. And this is the kind of disposition that we should have to it. We should have a great disposition to marriage and then prepare ourselves. The best thing that a young person can do who wants to be with another person is prepare yourself to be married. This is how we've done it. Even non-Christian cultures, notable, significant cultures have always esteemed marriage as something that desires, that we need a lot of preparation for, and that will offer you incredible happiness. So I would say to young people, step back, think about your fundamental commitments. What kind of union are you imagining? Do you know anything about what Jesus' intent for marriage is? Marriage is created by God to be a path of salvation, to be a path of transformation for people. It's the context in which we can learn to love God, in which we can learn to serve another. You know, I'll just speak for myself as a man. I had no idea what I would be willing to do to make my wife happy and to take care of my children and now my grandchildren. Men can do incredible things and will do incredible things like work themselves to death in order to take care of their wife and to take care of their children and their grandchildren. In our culture, in secular culture, everything's about a job. I think it's so backwards. I'm not trying to downplay jobs. Jobs are very, very important. But jobs exist to support families. The core is the family. The job, if you have no family, what are you working for? What's the purpose? Men labor because they want to actually care for and provide for their spouse and their children and grandchildren, for their homes and their communities. This is what enables a man to become who he needs to be. And a woman the same way. Part of this sexual revolution has been an attempt to negate the fundamental sexual differences between a man and a woman. Men are in every way uniquely male. Do you know every single cell in the human being is either male or female? It's not just our brains. It's not just our bone structure. Every single part of us is male or female and is absolutely unique. No man can perform the miracle of conceiving a child, gestating a child, bearing a child, nursing a child, and raising a child like a mother can. No one can replace a mother, which is why in traditional societies and in America for the vast majority of our history, the whole goal of the man is to provide a context for the mother to be a mother. Motherhood is the supreme job. Every other job exists to support it. By the way, that's C.S. Lewis, if you're wondering. Motherhood is the supreme job. This is also one of the reasons that Christian societies like ours, to this day, love the Virgin Mary more than any other woman in the history of the human race. Did the Virgin Mary ever have a job in the secular world? Did she ever get a paycheck? Did she ever, put on a pantsuit? No. She was a mother, and she raised the most important human being that has ever lived. And we thank God that she did. She was the perfect mother for the perfect son who has changed the world. Motherhood is sublime. And when young people are thinking about that, they really need to think about this, about family life, not just about their immediate feelings. And then when you're looking for someone to share a fundamental commitment, a fundamental outlook on life is very, very important. You may be attracted to this person and they may be attracted to you, but that doesn't mean that you should do anything about it. And you should have some respect for what could happen if you give too much place to sexual desire and you know that the fundamentals aren't there. You're really wasting your time. You're really wasting your time. You could end up getting bound up in a relationship, and no one should enter a relationship in which they think they have to fix the other person. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
Mostly he's good or mostly she's good. I couldn't live with this. I couldn't live with that. That doesn't mean that you marry a perfect person. We're not perfect people, right? One of the great qualities to form a marriage is you focus on your own problems and you cover over the problems of your beloved, right? That's what love does. Love covers a multitude of sins. The scripture says you put a blanket of love over that. But we all have things we can't live with. And if you know that there's something in a person you're interested in that you can't live with, don't start. You're not going to be the fixer of this problem. And if you allow your heart to get bound up with someone that you know you can't make a life with, you are literally causing yourself pain, self-inflicted pain. Better to exercise some reserve.
Yeah. That is actually really good. I've heard that a lot of people they found a match through people that they know, right? And because they figured out, well, this person has these qualities and this, and then how they were able to complement each other, right?
Yes.
Now you also mentioned commitment. Commitment's a very big thing. But I've also seen many people be quick to make commitments, but never keep them. Why do you think we're seeing that?
Well, for us to make empty promises is a character flaw, and the development of our character is not a major cultural ambition at the moment. Let me use a parallel. One of the things that we are very committed to today is the gym. Many people are committed to the gym, some for very good reasons, some for very bad reasons, and there's everything in between. Caring for the body, taking care of our body is a very important thing today, especially because we've become a screen-centered, sedentary culture, which is very unhealthy for the body. To sit, for instance, in a chair for 8 hours a day, it's very, very unhealthy. We who have to do that should have disciplines in which we get up every hour, we walk outside, we breathe some fresh air as much as you can in Southern California, and we move around. But caring for the body is very, very important. One of the great crises of our time is the obesity crisis in America. And there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. Our sedentary way of life is that, but also our food, which is really horrible. We have so many chemicals in our food that are very hard for us to digest, and we're really hurting ourselves very badly. If we could have the same commitment to the development of our inner person that we have to the care of our body, we would be in a lot better way. One of the easy ways to do that is for people who are young adults and are looking for relationships to think deeply about what they admire in another person. If they can think through that and even document it, I think this is one of the most helpful exercises to be able to find a good match. Document what you're looking for. I did this when I was a young man, when I was 18 years old. I did this. So if you want to have a good match, then think about what you admire. What kind of person do you want to spend your life with? That's a huge decision. Write it down. Do you want them to be trustworthy? Do you want them to keep commitments, or do you want them to say, make you promises and then break them all the time? Whatever you want, you should labor to be, because you're going to attract people of the same ilk. If you want to find a partier who likes to have one-night stands, then go to parties in which it's expected that you're going to have, that's what you're going to get. And it's going to get old very, very quickly. If you want someone who cares about love, who values relationships, look for someone who has that kind of relationship with their parents. If you're looking for a man who's going to love you, find a man who loves his mother. If he doesn't love his mother, you think he's going to love you? This is the woman who bore him, like who made his lunch. I'm feeling a little emotional. I buried my mother last November. She lived with me for 22 years, the last 22 years of her life. It was a great honor for me to have my mother with me. And you should think through this, what you want, and then be that, and trust that the Lord in his providence is going to arrange a match. Don't sell yourself short. Decide what you consider most important in a partner, be that thing, and then when you find that match, you can both labor to become who you want to be. Having that mentality, it's not like you're looking for someone perfect. There's nobody perfect except one. That's him. That's it. There's one. But the rest, we should be laboring to improve. We should be laboring to become loving people of integrity and character and virtue. And if you find someone like that, that's also wonderful, because then you can make mistakes without judgment. Judgment is one of the most horrible things in any relationship. If you value forgiveness, this is precious, because then you will be able to make the mistakes that you will necessarily make in your relationship. You'll be able to make mistakes, seek forgiveness, forgive each other, and be the stronger for it. So knowing also how to say, I'm sorry, very, very important in a partner. Someone who can own their responsibilities. If you see that, there's almost nothing you can't conquer, almost nothing you can't fix. If you're humble enough to own your responsibilities and say, please forgive me, and let's try again. You know, I have a practice, I learned it from beautiful people in the church. It's practiced by Christians all over the world. When we go to bed at night, I ask the forgiveness of my wife. I make a little bow and I say, forgive me, a sinner. And she says, God forgives. And then she says, forgive me, a sinner. And we kiss each other. And I do that with all my children. So we end the day, we have a prayer before the Lord, and then we go to sleep with forgiveness. Talk about peace. No grudges are held. No grudges. No one's allowed to just carry a grudge to bed so that it continues for 2 or 3 days. The scriptures say, don't let the sun go down on your anger.
Yeah, that's such an important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always heard that. I think I was even raised with that. Like, don't let the sun go down on your anger, right? You have to be quick to resolve those conflicts within each other. But it's very interesting that you use the word toil, or at working on yourself, right? Well, working and then
Yes.
wanting to be the person that you want the other person to be,
Yes.
which is very, very helpful, because you shouldn't be expecting something of others that you can't do.
Yes. And you can't control others. So it's also in vain.
Yeah.
You can control yourself. With God's help, you can control yourself. So to work on yourself, to become who God's asking you to be, is something very doable. It's very accomplishable. St. Paul puts it this way. He says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. It's something that needs to be worked out, something that needs to be processed. It's called growing. It's called growing. And for a human being to be actively engaged in the process of growing is a magnificent sight to see. And when you see someone else who's committed to that kind of transformation by grace, I'm not saying, you can do it in your own strength. No. with God's help. With God's help, you can make really great progress, and you can do it together if you find a partner who's committed to that.
Right. Now, I've also seen a lot of people in my generation also sort of, I think religion sounds like a cultural thing sometimes for people, right? But when we're looking for a partner, we think, oh, in their bio it says, I'm a Christian.
Sure.
And you think, oh, that checks it off, right? But what are some real things that we should be looking for rather than just looking at a bio, right? And
Sure.
this person's a Christian.
Well, first, let me say how happy I am that someone would say that. Because for a long time in our culture, there is so much embarrassment associated with the name of Jesus and with being a Christian. It is important for there to be Christianity in the culture, 100%. Our problem in our culture is that we don't have any. And downstream from culture is politics, and our politics have become almost exclusively secular, and we're all suffering very badly because of it. So to have Christianity in the culture is absolutely wonderful and very, very important. When I grew up, there were all sorts of markers that were very clear about what kind of culture we are, and they're gone today. We just don't have those, the public acknowledgement of the name of God and the name of Jesus like we used to have.
Right.
That's big, big trouble. But, of course, only Christian people who have that commitment in their own heart and are working it out in their own families are going to produce such a culture. It's easy, of course, to say something. It's something else to do. You might remember the teaching of Jesus. It's a rather frightening teaching. You know, Jesus, one of the proofs of his authenticity as the Son of God was that he didn't tickle people's ears. He said many, many beautiful things, but he also said many, many hard things. We were able to accept the hard things because of the love that he demonstrated, which was so immense and is so beyond us. I'm thinking of him on the cross, nails through his hands and feet, blood pouring from his head, a spear put in his side. We would all be passed out by that much suffering, having been scourged, and that for hours. Yet what was he thinking about? He was thinking about his mother, getting his mother cared for. He was thinking about the people who did it to him, literally praying, oh Lord, Father, forgive them, forgive them. And he was thinking about us. The church fathers say that when Jesus was on the cross and he lifted up his head and he said, I thirst. He wasn't just saying, put some of that vinegar on my tongue so that I can say more words, but he was making a statement, a theological statement about his desire for every human being. He thirsted for us. He wants us. That is the one who can inspire us to do really great things. And it's that love that should inspire us to be serious about being his disciples. And he warns us. He says, why do you call me Lord and do not do what I say? That's a very scary thing. Why do you call me Lord and do not do what I say? And remember when at the end, the parable, the end of St. Matthew 25, he describes the separation of the sheep and the goats at the great judgment. And interestingly, he says to the people who were the goats on his left side, he said, I was in prison and you didn't visit me. I was hungry and you didn't give me any food. I was thirsty. You didn't give me, I was naked and you didn't give me any clothing. And then they said, Lord, when did we see you and not do that? And he said, inasmuch as you did not do it to the least of these my brothers, you didn't do it to me. They thought that they were close to him, but they actually weren't doing anything that he did. The other people, the sheep, he said, come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world, because I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. He lists all these things, but they were so focused on serving him that they weren't like putting check marks every time they did a good deed. They said, Lord, when did we do that? When did we do that? And they said, as much as you did it. The Lord says, in as much as you did it to your neighbor, to the least of these my brother, you were doing it to me. That mentality is the mentality of a true Christian. We're trying to live like Jesus now, by his love, by his grace. We want him to have his way with us. We want to care for people the way that he cared for people. And we're not doing it like noticing it. That's one of the great qualities of a true Christian is we do it and then we say, Lord, I'm only your unworthy servant after having done it.
Mm.
I'm only your unworthy servant, and without your grace, I know I couldn't do anything at all. That kind of humility combined with the commitment to love, this is the important thing. So this can keep you from being too quick to say, I'm a Christian, look at me. And those who admire Jesus, they should remember what he's calling them to. He's calling to them to bear a cross. He said, if anyone wants to come after me, first thing that they have to do, deny yourself. Pick up your cross and follow me. There's no following Jesus and pleasing the world at the same time. So for instance, in this culture, there's so much pressure, to say, oh, kudos to that and kudos to that, things that we shouldn't be saying kudos to. Like this whole transgender thing that's so cruel and yet so popular with so many. I have to, we have a woman running for president who introduces herself with her pronouns. That is so backwards. That is so un-Christian to talk that way and to treat God-created masculinity and femininity like it can be changed by our own personal decisions, like we are God and we can decide one day we're this and another day we're that. That is so ridiculous that we shouldn't have anything to do with it at all.
Yeah. Now, you know what? I explained to you this a little bit before we started. I was scrolling through Instagram and I noticed, there'd be a message to Christian ladies, talking about purity, right? And then you go in the comment section and there's a bunch of people saying, why are you so obsessed with purity, right? Like, why are you so scared? Like, what's up with this? Don't you need to explore, do all this other stuff, right? So, what, to those people, why would you say, purity is so important to be?
It's a great question. May many, many more people ask that question. In the Orthodox Church, when we get married, we have crowns put on our head by the priest. The wedding service is actually called the crowning service. It's very ancient. It goes back to the role of the crown in the Olympic Games, centuries and centuries and centuries before Christ. The reason that there's three reasons that crowns are put on our head. One is because when a couple gets married, they create a new home, a new family that's never existed before. A man and a woman become a new independent family, and they're related to with respect by their parents, by their grandparents. They are a new family. And that man is the king of his home, and she's the queen of their home. And only they are going to make the rules and laws of that house, which is why they have crowns on their head. They literally are the king and queen of their home. As a matter of fact, that principle is reflected in what's called English common law, which undergirds our laws in the United States, which is the reason why a police officer can't go into your home without a warrant, because that is your sovereign domain. And he does not have authority to come into that house because the husband and the wife are the king and queen of that house. A man's castle is his home. This is the English principle in English common law. A man's home is his castle. That's one reason. Another reason that we put crowns on the heads of married people is because they're committing themselves to a form of martyrdom in marriage, to lay down their life for the other. As a matter of fact, the lesson that's read from the New Testament in the marriage service comes from Ephesians 5, where Paul describes in great detail how the wife should treat her husband and how the husband should treat his wife. The wife gets 3 verses, and she's basically told to respect her husband, to obey him. The husband gets 9 verses. Oops. 9, where's the equality there, Lord? Anyway, 9 verses. And in the 9 verses, Jesus says to the husband, you have to treat your wife's body exactly as your own, and you have to die for her. You have to shed your blood for her and wash her by the word of God and present her the standard, what God asks, is very, very difficult. I use that to console the ladies because these days a lot of ladies don't like the idea of having to obey their husband. They think somehow they don't have a beautiful view of obedience like Christians do. We love obedience. It's an honor to obey people. But the husband has to deny himself, and the wife too. You can only do that by having that martyric spirit, by being willing to die to yourself in order to serve another. This is why crowns are put on. That's the second reason. The third is, to your point, The church fathers say that the third reason that we put crowns on the couple's head is as a reward for their chastity, because they chose to preserve their purity and to give it as the greatest gift to their spouse on their wedding day. St. John Chrysostom, one of the greatest church fathers in the history of the church, says that nothing contributes to the longevity and the happiness of a marriage more than bringing chastity to the marriage. It's more important than bringing an education. It's more important than bringing property, money. Those things, if God wills, you can work hard and accomplish them. But if you want to be happy, don't play married before you're married. If you take the goods of marriage, which is to be able to make love to your spouse and to become one flesh, this is holy. This is something that should only be done with your spouse, and it will set you apart from everybody else. It will be a great glue, a great super glue, and also a place of miracles in which a human being is fashioned. That's not to be played with. And if you honor God and you honor your spouse, St. Paul commands it too. That's also a reason. 1 Thessalonians 4, he says, don't defraud your brothers sexually. Meaning, when you're dating someone, don't steal. You don't know that that person is going to be your spouse until you're married.
Yeah.
Until you're married. You may think you're going to get married. You may be 100% certain this is the person for you, but you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. That person could get hit by a car and you end up marrying someone else. And if you start playing married before you're actually married, not only are you taking the goods of God before you have a right to take them, but you're stealing from whoever that person is. If you sleep with a man, but you don't end up marrying him, he's going to know you in a way that he should only know his wife. And when he marries the next woman, she's going to be insecure, especially if she sees you. She's going to think, oh my gosh, my husband was with that woman exactly like he was with me. He knows her in a way that he shouldn't know her. And this is why we have so much divorce in our culture. You know, when I was young, when I was born, the vast majority of marriages were virginal marriages in America. You don't have to be like some great saint. You just have to be a person of reason. Just be reasonable. It's not good for you. And Americans knew that. And so they didn't do it. We also got married younger. Those two are very connected. Those are very connected. Today, you know what the average number of sexual partners a person has when they get married? 4.5. When you join yourself intimately like that, and then you break up, and then you join yourself to another and break up, and then you join yourself to another and break up, and you join yourself to another and break up, and then a half. That's 4.5. When you finally get married to someone, how special is marriage? You've had this 4.5 times, and worse, you've broken it off. Your heart's been broken, and then you recovered and you did it again. What's going to keep you from doing it? Your first big fight when you're married. Mm-hmm. What's going to keep you from just, hey, you know what? I got over 4.5. I can get over you. And that's exactly what happened. Today, we have so many people getting married, divorcing. Americans have come to think monogamy means being married to one person at a time. They might have been married 5 times and they call themselves monogamous. President Trump thinks he's monogamous. He's married to his 3rd wife. We've never had a president in the history of America married to 3 people. He's the first. President Reagan was the first ever to be divorced. Yeah. So, and these are supposedly bastions of the conservative movement. I think not. Monogamy means you're married to one woman ever. That's what the Christian standard is, monogamy. Yeah. And if you want to have a happy, long marriage and be blessed, then don't play married now. Keep it. Of course it's hard. What great thing in life isn't hard? It's true. Is there anything great in life that doesn't take sweat? Mm. If you want to have a great marriage, you want to be outrageously happy for the majority of your life, work hard in your courtship to be noble. Work hard to be noble. God will bless you. And you'll be so happy. You'll be saying, Father Josiah was right. Thank you, Father, for encouraging me. I've seen this over the years.
Yeah. No, you know what? That actually brings up a question. I've had this told to some people too. It's where you live together before getting married, right? But not having any not being, I guess, not giving up your purity. But I do wonder, is there a line that you're almost
right?
Over sort of
Right, sure. You're going to live with the object of your desire and you're not going to sleep with the object of your desire. Forgive me, but that's a fantasy. That's a fantasy. Besides being just crazy, right? That's like saying you're an alcoholic and you want to sleep with a bottle of gin every night right in your chest, but you're not going to open it and have a drink, right? What would you say to that person? You're nuts.
Yeah.
Keep the gin in the kitchen or give it to someone else, right? So if you love that person, then just act. You know, you don't need to do all the things our culture says you need to do to get married. You do not. What you need to do is what our culture doesn't mention, which is you need to become a mature person of commitment, of moral commitments.
Yeah.
As soon as you become an adult, you know, we have this weird thing today that didn't used to exist in America or anywhere called adolescence. Today, we have this thing called childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. Traditional societies have two, childhood and adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. In your teens, you became an adult. There were all sorts of beautiful rituals and maybe a quinceañera or whatever it is. You have that movement, you're an adult, and now you're expected to live as an adult. Today, we have this product of wealthy Western European countries of adolescence. And it used to be short. It used to be like from, even when I was growing up, it was like from 13 to maybe 18 or 19. No one in my generation came to their senior year in high school and wanted to live one day at their parents' home. I moved out when I was 17. And if someone had told me, you got to move back in your parents' house, I would have said, I would rather die. That's what I would have said. I would rather die than move into my parents' house in my mid-20s. Today, because of video games and entertainments, which have become a core of people's lives, that doing what you need to do, and there are a lot of other reasons, the difficulty in the economy, the expense of things, and that's a cultural-wide problem because we don't live within our means anymore, which is a fundamental moral financial principle that we just violate.
Mm-hmm.
People have a hard time getting a house, but that doesn't mean that you have to live with your parents. Just live simple. Live simple. You can do it. Be responsible for yourself and tell yourself, it's a disgrace to have my parents taking care of me when I'm 30 years old. I should be taking care of my parents. And that's what St. Paul says. He says that children should grow, parents should take care of their kids. And when kids become adults, it's piety to care for your parents. Mm. How are you going to do that if you're 35 years old and you're still living at home?
Yeah.
Get out of the house. Force yourself to grow up. Live simply. Live within your means.
Yeah. Now, final question. What is just your message to Gen Z? Whatever you want, but just the final thoughts for them.
My final thought is to say to you, sweetheart, and to your generation that you're loved. You're loved by God. You're valuable. God has plans for your life. Make room for Him. Make room for Him. Open your heart. Let God be with you. Let God lead your life. Trust Him. And then measure everything else around you by His wisdom. Measure everything else by His wisdom. Be serious. Be serious about your life. Look at it and ask yourself, is this the kind of life that I'm going to be proud of when I'm 80 years old?
Good. It's true. That's really good. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Father, for
You're welcome.
yes, and being willing to do that.
I'm very happy to meet you, and I wish you well in your projects.
Thank you so much.